The formal surrender brought peace on paper, yet it initiated an unprecedented wave of violence that investigators erased from all protocols. Tens of thousands of women endured documented assaults across multiple occupation zones. Hospital administrators in Berlin, Königsberg, Freudenstadt, and Nemmersdorf registered an overwhelming influx of severe physical trauma. This legal suppression required precise administrative boundaries. The London Agreement of 1945 established the strict procedural parameters for the Nuremberg military tribunals. This exact framework entirely excluded any actions committed by Allied forces from international jurisdiction. The gathered evidence vanished. Prosecutors officially reclassified these widespread attacks as minor local infractions and isolated disciplinary incidents. The epicenter of this administrative void materialized in the capital during the Spring Offensive. April 1945 brought total institutional collapse across the urban grid. The city shattered into 4 operational zones. Command lines snapped abruptly. Civilian police structures disintegrated completely. 1.5 million Soviet troops poured directly into the designated perimeter. This mass equaled the modern population of Munich, forcefully compressed into a single ruined landscape. Tank treads crushed shattered brickwork. The sound echoed through ruins. The 1st Belarusian and 1st Ukrainian fronts advanced steadily. Marshals Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev directed the coordinated tactical assault. Yet, an organizational vacuum formed immediately behind the advancing vanguard. 1.5 million combatants occupied the terrain without a single military police precinct. The sheer volume of incoming infantry fractured the existing command structure. Political officers from the Glaver propaganda department documented the immediate logistical fallout. Their internal reports noted a total inability to monitor troop behavior. Sector commanders lost practical control over their deployed mobile units. Military discipline simply evaporated. On April 24th, headquarters initiated an attempt to establish operational control. Colonel General Nikolai Berzarin assumed military command of the sprawling occupation zone. He officially signed the administrative paperwork to take charge on paper. A 34-year-old journalist documented the collapse of urban social structures in her diary, titled "A Woman in Berlin." Established norms evaporated, leaving a stark reality of those who take and those who are taken. Without active officer oversight, the urban survival infrastructure transformed into a concrete trap. Air raid shelters, designed to shield civilians from death, became isolated underground zones of violence. These subterranean spaces severed physical contact with the surface world and its remaining legal frameworks. The heavy echo of standard-issue army boots reverberated continuously through the concrete underground bunkers. Spatial isolation guaranteed operational impunity for the advancing squads. Over 300 fortified bunkers existed across the capital, creating a subterranean network disconnected from military jurisdiction. Official combat reports identified the 3rd Guards Rifle Division, the 8th Tank Corps, and elements of the 9th Army. These formations occupied key districts, specifically targeting the neighborhoods of Mitte, Friedrichshain, and Lichtenberg. Their tactical documents outlined precise objectives, yet they contained 0 directives regarding civilian management. Infantry operated independently within an administrative vacuum. Across the ruined capital, exactly 4 main sectors remained devoid of oversight. Gynecologist Charlotte Palmer filled medical charts. She worked fast. She documented physical trauma without military cause. The Charité hospital statistics recorded everything. They captured what Colonel Alexei Kudrovtsev hid. Beds were full. The hospital smelled of iodine. Blood soaked into old bandages. The wards overflowed with civilians. Founded in 1710, Charité survived centuries. It endured the 7 Years' War. It survived Napoleon. The stone walls withstood World War I. General Berzarin issued a directive on April 28th. It ordered respect for civilians. The paper held 0 weight. The directive failed. The 5th Shock Army lacked military police on the ground. Rules meant nothing. Oversight mechanisms collapsed within hours. Kudryavtsev led discipline for the entire army. He admitted measures were impossible. Soldiers operated without oversight. Troops moved freely. Hospital protocols broke under the pressure. Palmer recorded exactly 300 emergency hospitalizations. This happened between April 25th and May 5th. Religious status provided zero protection. Storm groups breached St. Mary's Church. Orthodox icons inside failed to stop them. They ignored them. Pastor Otto Debelius filed a strict report. 2 nuns lay dead in the sacristy. No military objectives existed there. Medical charts and church documents replaced emotional accounts, stripping away the panic to reveal the cold, forensic reality of the urban occupation. The clinical archives preserved the facts. Today, ice crossings on the Baltic Sea represent popular routes. In 1945, this frozen surface became a designated interception zone for civilian columns. The Berlin catastrophe merely scaled up operational tactics already established during the fall of Königsberg. Winter temperatures permitted rapid pedestrian movement, but thinning spring ice reduced the transit speed of convoys. Soviet mobile units intercepted these delayed formations, isolating specific demographic groups. The capture of Königsberg in April 1945 accelerated this tactical pattern. Healthcare facilities across the ruined capital lost their protected status, becoming primary objectives for advancing infantry. At the Juditon Children's Hospital, medical personnel recorded the total collapse of standard guidelines. Advancing squads made no tactical distinction among pediatric patients, clinical staff, or pregnant civilians. Following the capitulation of Breslau in May, clinical archives exposed the exact logistics of the occupation phase. The personal diary of Dr. Fritz Janka detailed 76 emergency medical evacuations. 17 of these specific files contained conclusive forensic proof of organized gang rape. Dr. Janka's medical charts explicitly noted deliberate physical mutilations unrelated to combat scenarios. The surgical assessments confirmed severe trauma without any military necessity. Why did assault groups in Allenstein attack local parishes? This act was pure symbolic dominance. They crushed the defeated. The border vanished. Civilians became the enemy. The medical evidence exposed an internal fracture. Troop psychology fundamentally shifted. The 5th Rifle Division changed entirely. Their mental boundaries completely dissolved. General Alexander Gorbatov noted this. He commanded the 3rd Guards Army. His memoirs detailed the transformation. 4 years of annihilation altered them. The soldiers were different now. They were no longer defenders. Raw revenge drove their tactical choices. Lieutenant Vladimir Gelfand kept a diary. His private words revealed everything. The mentality was raw. They wanted total, reciprocal devastation. Civilians became primary military targets. Allenstein absorbed this rigid shift. Violence gained a clear methodology. The terror was procedural. Sanctuaries offered zero actual protection. Father Johannes Hanowski documented the horror. He preserved the Warmia Diocese records. The Paris Chronicles detailed the trauma. Army boots crushed shattered stained glass. Shards crunched underfoot. These acts were not random. They were calculated strikes. Troops weaponized the sacred spaces. The destruction had specific meaning. Rape became a structural tool. Violence replaced combat. It was highly deliberate. Soldiers sought total subjugation. They broke the civilian spirit. Faith was targeted. Morale was destroyed. The institutions fell. Churches represented the psychological prize. Commanders tolerated the systemic abuse. Institutional collapse was complete. No military police intervened. The vacuum enabled the atrocities. Soldiers purposefully stormed church buildings to establish total dominion over the defeated populace. The conduct of the troops initially presented the appearance of collapsing discipline, yet refugee testimonies revealed a strict organizational framework. This symbolic terror relied upon a rigid procedural architecture rather than random outbursts. Between 1945 and 1946, investigators at transit centers gathered 30 independent statements documenting an identical operational pattern. Squads comprising 5 to 12 men systematically established external perimeters before advancing. A sharp metallic click of rifle bolts from the exterior cordons signaled the commencement of an operation. These units implemented a tactical approach that closely mirrored standard military guard regulations, adapted specifically for systematic violence. The personnel operated in designated shifts, deploying external observers to secure the perimeter while the primary detachment proceeded with the assault. This meticulous coordination demonstrated that the atrocities constituted an organized routine rather than a spontaneous breakdown of command. The ideological foundation for such institutional dehumanization originated significantly earlier in the conflict. In 1942, the propagandist Ilya Ehrenberg declared that the opposing demographic could no longer be considered human. The methodology was perfected. 5 million Soviet citizens died. Records confirmed it. This occurred during the Wehrmacht advance. The 1945 violence possessed statistical origins. It was 1945. The Red Army crossed the Vistula. Georgy Zhukov led the primary front. Ivan Konev pushed further west. Soviet troops entered German territory. They carried specific wartime trauma. Origins traced backward. In 1942, reports reached Moscow. Documents detailed Smolensk and Kiev. The Extraordinary State Commission investigated. They analyzed Belarus and Ukraine. They quantified the eastern losses. They cataloged systematic sexual assaults. German troops targeted peasant women. Data required formatting. They built a legal foundation. Future tribunals needed evidence. Frontline soldiers read these bulletins. Soldiers remembered everything. Families remained buried back east. The military command issued no directives. No official extermination order existed. Revenge became policy. The ideological framework provided justification. Ilya Ehrenberg authored specific leaflets. Propaganda departments printed millions. Units distributed them before combat. The mass printing of these ideological directives effectively legalized the resulting campaigns of civilian revenge. Mothers in rural East Prussia calculated poison dosages for their children before ingesting the substances themselves. Rumors of impending retribution outpaced the advancing Soviet armored divisions, permanently transforming the local demography before military contact. The regional population stood at 2,500,000 residents. The Ministry of People's Security documented 450 suicides across the eastern sectors. Sharp chemical odors of agricultural poisons lingered inside the enclosed Prussian farmhouses. This demographic effect manifested as a calculated response to frontline combat reports. A detailed special report submitted by the Sicherheitspolizei SD on December 17, 1944, formally categorized these civilian fatalities. State authorities documented this behavioral pattern across contested administrative zones. According to files from the Königsberg Provincial Archive, collective termination escalated when military units retreated. Investigators isolated specific geographical clusters to quantify this response mechanism. In Gumbinnen, registries documented exactly 89 cases where mothers administered lethal toxins to their daughters. Maternal suicide immediately followed. The neighboring municipality experienced a higher concentration of fatalities during the November 1944 occupation. 162 collective suicides were recorded in Goldap. Why did the Reich Foreign Ministry invite Swiss experts? They needed independent confirmation. The violence exhibited a ritualized pattern. The preceding suicide wave stemmed directly from this international commission. State agencies deployed. Swedish observers joined the commission. Colonel Hans Ebach led the inspection. He represented the Swiss military. He entered the Insterburg cold storage. Freezing air filled the underground morgue. Frost coated the steel racks. The temperature preserved the physical evidence. Ebach examined the victims methodically. He measured the lacerations. He noted the trauma parameters. He drafted the International Forensic Protocol. Forensic data demanded exact victim identification. Authorities cataloged the recovered remains. 13-year-old Gerda, 9-year-old Elizabeth, 84-year-old Magdalena Novak. Zero exceptions. Advanced age offered no protection. The injuries defied standard combat casualties. The state apparatus altered its strategy. Command issued the Festung Ostpreußen Directive. East Prussia became a rigid fortified zone. The administrative order prohibited early civilian withdrawal. The policy trapped local residents. No escape. The military locked civilians inside active combat sectors. The government prioritized army logistics. The rigid lockdown amplified the impending crisis. The forensic findings eventually broke the administrative paralysis. Authorities finally activated evacuation protocols late in the winter. 800,000 civilians ultimately abandoned their homes and fled to the coast. The Ministry of Propaganda continuously printed thousands of "Rettet unsere Frauen" posters. Operatives rapidly pasted these warnings across Reich factories and busy train stations. The dry clinical data from the International Commission immediately morphed into highly combustible fuel for the state media apparatus. Goebbels engineered a systematic panic. Photographs of civilian bodies arrived directly from advancing Wehrmacht units. Forensic doctors in Insterburg provided the precise medical credibility needed for this operation. By November 1944, these graphic records completely dominated UFA newsreels. The UFA Film Company controlled nearly all domestic cinema distribution across the country. This monopoly guaranteed massive reach. The state administration deliberately weaponized the formal forensic reports. The original intention was clear, as this propaganda was expressly designed to strengthen the civilian population's defense will. However, the exact opposite happened. The calculated visual terror provoked an uncontrollable mass panic instead. The front definitively shifted into the ethnic plane. What distinguished Nemmersdorf from hundreds of other ruined villages? It was the exclusively premeditated nature of the civilian massacre. The primary source for the massive psychological mobilization originated from a 48-hour time frame in this small Prussian settlement. The Angarap River established a natural geographic boundary just 10 kilometers from the Lithuanian border. When the 2nd Battalion of the 25th Guards Tank Brigade breached this threshold on October 21, 1944, the tactical advance transitioned into targeted civilian extermination. Soviet forces secured the sector for less than 48 hours before a rapid counterattack by the Fourth Army forced their withdrawal. This condensed time frame proves that the execution protocols were instantaneous and highly coordinated, rather than the byproduct of a prolonged military siege. Lieutenant Heinrich Amberg initiated the preliminary site inspection upon re-entering the perimeter. He moved systematically through the devastated courtyards, documenting the physical evidence amidst the heavy odor of charred timber and freezing mud along the Angarap riverbank. The resulting investigative protocol highlighted a severe operational anomaly. The casualties were not randomly discarded as conventional collateral damage. Instead, the bodies were strategically positioned across courtyards and stables to maximize the visual impact. Lieutenant Amberg formally recorded these primary evidentiary markers. Berlin clinics performed 130,000 emergency abortions. These occurred between June and October. It scaled the Nemmersdorf precedent. The capital collapsed. Early statistics showed 300 emergency admissions. Then, numbers escalated exponentially. Neutral diplomats documented the fallout. Swedish Ambassador Staffan Soderblom watched. He filed strictly detailed reports. Fear spread fast. Karl Burkhardt represented Switzerland. Both bypassed standard diplomatic language. Burkhardt noted atrocities. Law vanished entirely. Church delegations reported multiple cases. Neutral medical personnel supplied data. The Swedish mission remained active. The Swiss maintained communication channels. They formed one neutral network. Information flowed outward. Physical consequences shattered the city. Charlottenburg district recorded severe spikes. May 1945 brought death. 400 women committed suicide. Mortuary records confirmed this. Victims chose death over violation. Anthropologist Margaret Mead studied this. Panic drove them. Mead observed extreme survival circumstances. Alternatives felt worse than death. Suicide became a rational choice. An institutional vacuum enabled this. The episode became highly documented. Impunity cemented a dark reality. Bureaucratic systems absorbed the data. 130,000 surgical interventions formed the rigid foundation for new, highly sterile administrative protocols across the ruined capital. Clarence Whitfield stands before a military tribunal. He belongs to the 333rd Service Company. It is May 1945. The absence of a recognized legal category for mass violence left a dangerous void. This systemic gap enabled paradoxical injustice across the United States Army. Whitfield faces swift judgment. American military trials operate under the Manual for Courts-Martial of 1928. This archaic protocol was originally designed to maintain standard garrison discipline. It was never intended for the mass justice of active occupation troops. The tribunal consists solely of 5 to 9 officers. They rule without the inclusion of mixed juries. Civilian legal defense remains entirely absent from the proceedings. A severe procedural imbalance controls the entire courtroom. Case number 65 accelerates through the administrative channels. The official board of review exists merely in theory. Substantive appeals require rare political intervention. The military prosecutor technically holds the burden of proof. The verdict arrives swiftly. The heavy sound of the scaffold trapdoor echoes across the Landsberg disciplinary camp. The military hangs Clarence Whitfield exactly 3 weeks after his initial arrest. 29 death sentences. Case number 65 represents one node. Dozens of similar verdicts followed. The execution grid expands across the theater. Race defined the lethal outcomes. Segregation dictated everything. U.S. forces remained rigidly separated until 1948. Truman signed Executive Order 9981. Institutional division shaped military justice. Examine the archives. Historian J. Robert Lilly reviewed the classified data. He parsed 3,000 judge-advocate files. Files reveal bias. 2 contradictory legal standards emerged from the records. Skin color dictated the proceedings. Eisenhower issued Proclamation No. 1. The directive banned social contact. Troops avoided the defeated German population. Fraternization meant punishment. Commanders demanded strict distance from the occupied territory. Policy created perverse legal outcomes. Sociologist Peter Shrivers explained this administrative paradox. Romance drew severe administrative penalties. Rape bypassed these specific fraternization violations completely. Violence lacked personal bonding elements. Assaults avoided the fraternization labels. The grid locked. Executions claimed the lives of black soldiers. Between 1944 and 1946, 29 men faced the gallows. They hung for sexual offenses. Yet the military tribunals concluded their grim mandate with absolute silence, recording 0 white soldiers who received comparable sentences for identical acts. A military judge closes the file of Sergeant Robert L. Chambers. The charge lacks physical proof. While African American troops faced the gallows, white soldiers watched their dockets dissolve during preliminary inquiries. Out of 312 formal statements, exactly 24 reached a courtroom. The mechanics of this legal filtration relied on devaluing civilian testimony. Investigators labeled the victim, a 17-year-old girl, as a potential enemy of the state. This label automatically manufactured reasonable doubt. The testimony dissolved. The procedural blueprint guaranteed dismissals before a tribunal ever convened. Southern Hesse operated as a densely populated industrial region. The United States Third Army managed the territory under strict military jurisdiction, controlling millions of civilians across the sector. Between April 1945 and December 1946, the local registry logged the initial 312 allegations. The filter caught them. The 24 surviving dockets included 19 cases targeting African American defendants exclusively. Matching offenses by white personnel failed to cross the threshold of preliminary review. The military court officially dismissed the closed case of Sergeant Chambers. In 1947, the military drafted Operation Legal Shield. Today, analysts view these files as direct evidence of systemic erasure. The dismissal of Sergeant Chambers forced civilian organizations to count. The group intervened. Dr. Wilhelm Burkhardt recorded the medical damage. He documented 412 pregnancy terminations. The clinics operated. These procedures occurred between June and October 1945. Bavarian makeshift facilities handled the patient influx. The sharp smell of iodine filled unequipped wards. Nuns sterilized steel instruments. 412 surgical interventions happened in 5 months. Official military records maintained silence. The contrast remained. The American occupation zone held over 16 million civilians. These documented medical procedures represented a minor statistical fraction. The Army possessed exact incident data. Data remained hidden. Commanders intentionally classified the files as secret. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People investigated the disparity. Congress received their formal report in 1948. They titled it Double Standard. The document exposed the legal prosecution mechanics. Analysts supplied clear statistical evidence. Testimonies detailed the unequal application of martial law. Internal audits confirmed the civilian findings. The data matched. 180 accusations against white soldiers recorded in Legal Shield. A simple conversation with a local resident guaranteed a military tribunal. Yet violent physical assault was routinely processed as a minor disciplinary infraction. The foundation for those administrative findings was established in March 1945 by a single directive from General Dwight Eisenhower. The crisp crunch of the heavy paper of Proclamation No. 1 echoed as it was pasted to city walls. Eisenhower commanded a contingent of 1.6 million American soldiers, for whom this non-fraternization policy became absolute law. Consensual contact drew severe punitive measures, while undocumented sexual violence was systematically minimized by the bureaucracy. Local authorities vainly attempted to navigate this distorted legal landscape through official command channels. Mayor Alfred Risner of Kirchheim-Belanden submitted a formal report documenting 5 separate assaults over a 2-week period. The Occupational Administration reviewed his filing and returned a calculated resolution. They instructed the mayor to avoid pursuing actions that might compromise civilian cooperation. This directive constituted a deliberate refusal to impose disciplinary consequences upon the offending units. Bureaucratic preservation of military statutes superseded any investigation into basic human rights violations. The internal mechanics of this discriminatory justice system finally surfaced through an unexpected intelligence leak from the United States Third Army. Lieutenant Colonel James D. Black directed the legal operations and tribunal proceedings throughout the Bavarian sector. A compromised piece of private correspondence exposed his internal administrative observations regarding the command structure. In this written exchange, Black openly admitted that the vast majority of prosecutions proceeding to trial involved African American soldiers. Personal admissions from field officers never exited Third Army vaults. How did the War Department explain missing tribunal reports to Congress? They cited the protection of public morals. Severe felonies vanished. The Pentagon housed over 30,000 employees. They operated a strict bureaucratic filter. Headquarters routed all dispatches through this hub. Documents arrived. Clerks sorted the pages. Censors scrubbed the data. Evidence vanished. Congress received sanitized summaries. Command buried the raw facts. Media access stopped. Transcripts stayed classified. Censorship worked. Press correspondents encountered an administrative blockade on all primary tribunal materials requested from the military command. 0 official mentions occurred across 4 years. Across the Atlantic, the British government elevated the concealment protocol to a rigid administrative standard. Between 1945 and 1949, the House of Commons maintained a total informational blackout regarding Allied military offenses. Members of Parliament debated denazification procedures, administrative restructuring, and black market smuggling. The columns detailing physical violence against the occupied population remained blank. The dry rustle of the Hansard transcripts reveals a curated legislative record. Politicians analyzed infrastructure reconstruction logistics, deliberately bypassing the growing volume of filed civilian complaints against deployed personnel. Throughout the occupation period, there were exactly 0 mentions of military assaults within the official parliamentary documentation. The United Kingdom possessed a domestic population of approximately 48 million people in 1945. Those citizens elected representatives who subsequently maintained a coordinated embargo on all compromising field intelligence. The blockade held firm. This erasure required dedicated institutional mechanisms rather than passive oversight. Military commanders classified civilian allegations as hostile propaganda, ensuring the physical evidence never reached legislative bodies in London. The Special Committee on Military Discipline convened in 1946 to evaluate the operational conduct of British forces. After reviewing the curated field data, the Special Committee omitted all incidents of civilian abuse from the final 1946 report. Researchers break seals on cardboard boxes. Location is Q. The National Archives secure over 11 million official records. Parliamentary transcripts showed 0 evidence regarding civilian abuse. Yet the paper trail survived inside these concrete vaults. The year was 1994. The Allied Military Government Historical Review Group gained secure access. Extraction began. Researchers pulled 13 complete dossiers from the lowest shelves. A thick layer of dust coated the folders. The legislative silence was artificially engineered. Offenses occurred. The British state simply archived them. Clear cover-up evidence emerged. Lack of public debate equaled active administrative suppression. They found proof. They counted. The investigators reviewed every single page inside the storage facility. This was the definitive inventory of the remaining evidence, comprising exactly 13 fully documented cases surviving until 1994. Journalist William Douglas Home submitted his finished manuscript detailing violent crimes by British paratroopers directly to the editor of The Observer. To keep those 13 documented case files out of the 1945 newspapers, the military establishment enforced immediate and strict censorship. The War Office applied severe direct pressure on the publication staff. They completely suppressed the investigative column before the final printing. The cover-up demanded daily action. Colonel George Llewellyn, Chief of Discipline for the British Army Corps of the Rhine, continuously monitored these exact operational vulnerabilities. When civilian complaints escalated regarding the 11th Parachute Battalion in Sector C, officers initiated a physical evasion strategy. A standard British airborne battalion, exactly like the 11th, comprised approximately 600 combat personnel. These specialized troops relocated together as a single cohesive tactical block. Officers halted all criminal proceedings. The tactic of rapidly relocating problematic units to eliminate geographical evidence would become a standard operating procedure for future international conflicts. Commanders abandoned the local investigations. Facing mounting civilian accusations across the jurisdiction, the Regional Military Command hastily transferred the paratroopers into an entirely different sector. How do you close a case with direct physical evidence? Apply Section 583 of the British Military Manual. Rapid troop relocations relied on a strict bureaucratic protocol. The legal framework provided a specific mechanism for erasure. Section 583 downgraded severe criminal acts into mere instances of improper conduct. Commanders bypassed the courts entirely. They resolved accusations through internal demotions or administrative warnings. Without British witnesses, the regulations demanded no formal trials. Censorship operated alongside this administrative suppression. The Ministry of Defense issued defense notices, known as D notices, to major publishers. The ministry managed a contingent of 2,900,000 personnel across Europe. D-notices explicitly advised against reporting sexual indiscipline, looting, or civilian abuse in occupation zones. Compliance remained officially voluntary. Yet leading newspapers like The Times and the Daily Express abandoned complete investigations upon receiving the alerts. Institutional reputation took precedence over civilian justice. These two protocols buried concrete physical evidence. A deep relief track of a heavy British Army boot sat clearly in the mud at a crime scene. Investigators analyzed the sole pattern. The treads unequivocally matched the standard footwear issued to the 6th Battalion of the Durham Light Infantry. The unit held positions directly in that designated sector. Officers examined the physical proof. They compared the distinct ridges against the standard infantry issue. The match was exact. Nobody interrogated the soldiers. Nobody filed a report to higher command. The dossier remained hidden until 1998. Authorities closed file 27,245 under an expedited official procedure. 107 documented incidents filled the security files at the War Office archives. File 27,245 represented one fraction of these events codified by Army bureaucracy. Ingeborg Schaefer, aged 22, Elise Niemann, aged 40, and Clara Barron, aged 19, lay dead on the outskirts of Neustadt am Rübenberge. Their triple murder in April 1945 did not trigger a criminal homicide investigation. Instead, military clerks classified their violent deaths using the routine two-letter administrative abbreviation SR, denoting sexual relations. Situated just northwest of Hanover, Neustadt am Rübenberge maintained a population of approximately 15,000 residents. The town could not conceal a triple homicide from the local community. A local farmer reported seeing drunken British troops near the scene of the crime. Military police processed 18 separate SR cases through this bureaucratic channel, downgrading physical crimes into standard disciplinary infractions. An officer marked the paperwork with a formal notice of a warning issued to the perpetrators. A loud thud of a rubber stamp on the folder finalized the administrative procedure. According to the King's regulations enforced during occupation, military offenses fell into civil and internal categories. The framework permitted commanding officers to handle violations against foreign civilians as general indiscipline. Investigators did not pursue civilian witness testimonies further. Consequently, the Royal Military Police ceased the investigation, citing a lack of material evidence. Where did the order to hide evidence originate? It came directly from sector commanders' instructions. Directives bypassed standard military channels. Officers shut down pending cases entirely. Captain Alistair Hume wrote to his fiancée in July 1945. His letter exposed the internal paralysis. "I have no authority to stop them." The document sat untouched for half a century. It remained locked inside a family archive in York. Truth stayed buried. Speaking out meant losing command. Commanders denied justice. Major John Bailey provided the definitive proof. He directed the military administration in Hanover. Hanover was the administrative hub for the British zone. Tens of thousands of occupation troops converged there daily. Dense troop concentration generated constant civilian casualties. Bailey's diaries appeared posthumously in 1993. They documented the exact operational scale. He recorded 12 specific cases of extreme sexual violence. All incidents occurred strictly within his designated sector. The time frame spanned April to September 1945. The institutional response bypassed criminal law. Bailey recorded the explicit command from top headquarters. Sector commanders received one strict directive: avoid unnecessary scandals. Do not damage the troops. Image took priority. Evidence vanished. Officers closed files. The unspoken directive to protect the military reputation became an official administrative standard. In April 1945, Berlin hospitals registered tens of thousands of victims. Today, the official archives retain records of merely 17 crimes. Both British directives and American tribunals relied upon a legal precedent established during that spring. Documents from the Military Council of the First Belarusian Front recorded fewer than 520 disciplinary incidents. Command classified exactly 17 cases as criminal offenses against civilians. This administrative accounting contradicted observations from neutral diplomats inside the occupied sectors. A secret memorandum drafted by a special envoy of the Swedish Foreign Ministry on June 12 outlined a different reality. The dispatch estimated more than 95,000 cases of sexual violence occurring within the eastern districts of Berlin. Charité University Hospital, founded in 1710, remained one of the largest medical centers in Europe despite the rubble. Patient statistics from Charité were excluded from reports submitted to the German civil administration. These attacks occurred within a secured urban zone, eliminating combat chaos as an explanation. Institutional tolerance for violence operated as a standardized parameter across all victorious armies. The documentary registration of physical facts permanently yielded to the officially constructed national narrative. The greatest tribunal in history guaranteed legal immunity for the victorious armies. The suppression of incident reports transitioned into a permanent global legal architecture. Drafting required precision. Lawyers finalized the International Military Charter in London. Typewriter keys struck heavy paper, fixing the statutory language into binding international law. The metallic clack of the keys finalized the boundaries of guilt. Article 6 defined jurisdiction. It restricted prosecution solely to the European Axis countries. The cameras recorded the public prosecution of the defeated leaders. Meanwhile, the statutory framework granted structural immunity for the Allied forces. The Nuremberg trials began on November 20, 1945. Proceedings took place inside the heavily guarded Palace of Justice in Bavaria. 4 Allied judges sat on the bench. The resulting judicial asymmetry established a lasting precedent in international law. The legal boundaries dictated what constituted a war crime and exactly who faced the gallows. Allied actions fell outside this codified perimeter. Historian Miriam Gebhardt analyzed this legal isolation in the 2017 publication, Crimes Unspoken. She identified a multinational framework designed to erase specific civilian casualties from the official record. The deletion was intentional. It was not a byproduct of administrative overload. The framework worked. Decades passed before the archives slowly opened following the end of the Cold War. Even then, institutional resistance blocked publication attempts. The English manuscript, taken by force, faced rejection from 5 different academic publishers before printing in 1999. The original German edition of A Woman in Berlin underwent severe censorship. The publisher released the unchanged manuscript only after the author died. The victims lived with the physical trauma and the institutional silence. Their experiences vanished behind a constructed historical narrative. For 50 consecutive years, these incidents remained entirely absent from academic textbooks. Where did 175 American violation dossiers disappear? In 2001, the National Archives officially declared them lost. Nuremberg's legal immunity demanded action. State vaults required physical purges. The procedure was simple. Evidence had to vanish. France initiated structural erasure first. The French Armed Forces Ministry issued a directive. The year was 1967. It authorized targeted document destruction. State image required protection. Incident reports were burned. Any future investigation was blocked. Documentary gaps became permanent. American archives followed suit. By 2001, the United States facility held billions of records. Exactly these specific dossiers vanished. They carried one precise marking: Military Misconduct, Germany, 1945. Specific locations were targeted. Darmstadt records disappeared completely. Wiesbaden reports were purged. Accusations of rape were deleted. These administrative losses created permanent archival blind spots. The blackout was total. Reconstruction became impossible. Silence transcended national borders. It became a shared project. Institutions enforced the cover-up. The academic sphere complied. Initial research faced strict barriers. Ensuring the historical silence remained unbroken, 5 academic publishers rejected the original manuscript of Taken by Force. 1,900 internal reports sat in the American JAG Corps files. Before the total document destruction in 2001, military prosecutors applied selective sanitization. Journalist William Douglas Home experienced this suppression directly. He wrote a column detailing crimes in Hanover. Censors flagged the draft. Authorities threatened his career. The text never reached the public. The censorship extended deep into the archives. Clerks opened the physical folders. They reviewed the pages documenting civilian assaults. Black ink covered personal data across 41 court protocols. Names vanished under thick strokes. Specific locations disappeared. The procedure kept the paper intact but erased the evidence. The remaining text showed only vague administrative actions. Censors wiped identifiable references clean. The scale required immense administrative effort. The American Corps gathered 1,900 reports regarding violations. This volume meant almost 5 incidents for every single day of 1945. Newspapers faced rigid publication bans. In the United Kingdom, defense notices routinely blocked coverage of Allied troops. Governments enforced total silence across jurisdictions. Other nations chose a blunter approach. The Q archives held records of abuse. Officials did not merely seal these papers. Fire permanently eradicated them. In the British sector, the total of extracted and burned dossiers was 87. Foreign Office investigators breached the Hanslope Park archives. The year is 2012. They uncover a structural purge. The prior extraction of 87 dossiers was not an anomaly. It was protocol. The directive officially emerged in 1960. Operation Legacy began. During the active decolonization of the British Empire in the 1960s, the Foreign Office executed this precise administrative mandate. They targeted compromising colonial records, but the operational scope quickly expanded. Files from the German occupation fell under this exact purge mechanism. Documents relocated. Evidence vanished. Historian Norman Neymark mapped this exact structural dissonance. 2 parallel legal frameworks existed simultaneously. Public ceremonial justice awaited the vanquished. Private administrative concealment protected the victors. One courtroom featured intense international media scrutiny. The other operated in total shadow. The extraction was purely methodical. Investigators found deliberate strategic omissions. The historical memory of Allied actions underwent forced sterilization. No rogue officers, no accidental losses, just a highly regulated institutional blackout. Justice became an administrative secret. Swedish ambassador Staffan Soderblom placed a detailed dossier directly on the desk of the newly formed UN Human Rights Committee. It documented Allied sexual violence against civilians. The year was 1946. This committee had just begun its global operations to define post-war justice. The United States response was immediate. American representatives labeled the entire document residual propaganda. An aide stamped the folder. The file went straight into a vault. No debate happened, no investigators deployed. While the British managed their paper trail through Operation Legacy, the French army neutralized evidence through 18 secret tribunals. France opted for a tightly controlled environment to handle colonial troops stationed in Germany. The Service Historique de la Défense in Vincennes still holds these specific court records. The judicial proceedings took place behind locked doors. The courtrooms remained empty. No victims attended the hearings. No journalists took notes. No external witnesses stepped inside the perimeter. The military simulated a strict judicial process just to maintain its public image. Historian Jean-Pierre Richardot analyzed this specific approach in 2003. The victors required complete moral legitimacy across a ruined Europe. Acknowledging internal crimes threatened the core narrative of liberation. These closed courts successfully bypassed real punishment. Instead of facing prison sentences, convicted soldiers received administrative transfers to different military bases. 63 names on a handwritten sheet from 1946. The military administration perfected the dismissal mechanism applied to Ambassador Soderblom on Anton Schnitzler's report. Schnitzler listed assaulted women from Freudenstadt, destroyed in 1945, submitting his findings to the French mission with a request for legal proceedings. The command ignored the documented victims. Bureaucrats classified the submission as correspondence with no procedural value. No disciplinary action advanced, and no criminal case emerged. The yellowed pages of the report moved into diocese storage, remaining unexamined for over 50 years. The list never entered any courtroom as evidence. In 1998, historian Thomas Breckenmacher located the document inside the archive. Why were there 0 trials in Germany throughout the entire year of 1945? The French military mission ignored the retrieved archive completely. They operated under a strict and differentiated hierarchy of punishments. Assaulting enemy civilians ranked last. At the time, the geographic borders of Germany held approximately 65 million people. Command directives legally classified every single resident as a hostile population. Historian Raphael Branch analyzed the mechanics of this judicial doctrine. Disciplinary protocols prioritized internal troop insubordination, desertion, and material theft. Crimes committed against hostile demographics warranted minimal intervention from command staff. Officers discarded civilian assault reports without securing physical evidence or opening formal inquiries. Investigative files remained closed. The administrative framework blocked all legal recourse. Troops committed the initial physical assaults. Allied bureaucracies deleted the resulting records. Thousands of verified complaints crossed command desks. 0 prosecutions occurred in Germany. The judicial pattern was identical elsewhere. Military tribunals maintained this exact statistical baseline across multiple European occupation zones. Between 1943 and 1945, Italian campaign courts delivered exactly 15 convictions. What began across the Italian region of Lazio in 1944 replicated precisely across Baden in 1945. Maintaining 0 military convictions throughout the German occupation zone extended a calculated legal tactic previously tested against thousands of civilians. During the 5-month infantry breakthrough at Monte Cassino, command structures instrumentalized colonial troops. Officers deployed these specific regiments for the most dangerous frontal assaults. Following this military offensive, these units committed mass assaults across Chioggia and southern Lazio. The aftermath left 7,000 documented civilian victims. An official Italian Red Cross investigation confirmed 300 immediate female fatalities. These deaths resulted directly from physical trauma. Historian Benjamin Stora identified the hierarchical distancing between metropolitan officers and colonial infantrymen as the central mechanism for institutional denial. Local German authorities still attempted to force a formal judicial response using standard bureaucratic channels. Mayor Karl Eberhard systematically compiled witness testimonies across his municipality. He aggregated 17 verified instances of violence and personally delivered the completed dossier to the designated French liaison officer. The military administration intercepted the paperwork. This action ensured the documents never triggered a formal investigation. Only the heavy ink stamp of the Baden Regional Administration marked the paper. The duplicate file survived by accident. The military code demanded 20 years of hard labor, but Field Command reclassified mass incidents as a simple administrative failure. Mayor Karl Eberhard futilely demanded the application of Article 218 of the 1943 French Military Code. The written law was unambiguous. Article 218 mandated between 5 and 20 years of penal servitude. By the standards of the 1940s, this meant physically exhausting isolation inside forced labor camps. Yet, a rigid legal filter operated on the ground. Internal disciplinary commissions downgraded felony offenses into minor infractions. The judicial process stalled. Field officers qualified severe criminal acts as internal disciplinary violations. They punished offenders with temporary confinement or a unit transfer. The mechanism was clear. Formal military prosecution required a highly publicized denunciation. Otherwise, the legal framework ignored the events. Headquarters possessed full awareness of this procedural gap. Lieutenant Colonel Jean Pouget documented the reality in a memorandum dated May 5, 1945. His report detailed Spahi units entering households and committing assaults openly. The command chose silence. They resolved the fallout internally without generating official civilian records. There were 0 arrest warrants issued for the Spahi patrols operating along the upper Danube. Ulrich von Ingelheim adjusted the examination light over patient 1235AB, meticulously documenting multiple perineal lacerations and massive internal tissue damage. While Lieutenant Colonel Jean Pouget wrote internal memoranda regarding the absence of arrests, the actual physical evidence accumulated rapidly inside the municipal hospital wards. The facility corridors smelled heavily of iodine, raw blood, and carbolic acid. Medical staff pushed stretchers through the overcrowded triage areas. Dr. von Ingelheim recorded severe vaginal injuries and extensive blunt force trauma across dozens of incoming admission forms. This clinical terminology masked repeated physical assaults, resulting in 3 fatalities from uncontrolled internal hemorrhaging. The diagnostic scope expanded when the Heidelberg University Clinical Center processed 38 separate cases involving minors with catastrophic genital trauma. Established in 1386, this institution was one of Europe's oldest medical centers, ensuring strict standardization for forensic injury documentation. The hospital registrars cataloged these physical violations purely as physiological data points, avoiding any subjective analysis of the perpetrators. Patient 1235AB exhibited obvious signs of collective assault, generating a medical file that forensic gynecologists would study for decades. The municipal archives absorbed these handwritten triage reports. Simultaneously, Bishop Johannes Baptista Sproul activated secured Vatican diplomatic channels to transmit the aggregated medical data outward. 130,000 soldiers formed the French Expeditionary Corps. The medical triage reports in Freudenstadt were a direct consequence of deploying this force into the region. Over 60% of these men arrived from colonial territories. Regiments of Spahis and Goumiers moved into the streets. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny directed their advance. The command used these units as shock troops. They targeted settlements offering only symbolic resistance. A vast hierarchical gap separated the frontline units from the metropolitan French officers. This distance created an administrative void. Oversight vanished. Previous operations in Italy had generated thousands of documented assault complaints. The command structure ignored them. This exact force crossed into German territory. The manpower matched the population of a large European city of that era, transplanted entirely into a single occupation zone. The administrative silence held firm. The Rothenburg-Stuttgart diocese cataloged the immediate civilian cost. 600 female casualties were recorded in the first 48 hours. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny signs a confidential document, April 1945. 130,000 expeditionary soldiers occupy the Black Forest. They are not simply an advance guard. Higher command sanctioned their actions. Freudenstadt sat isolated deep within this dense timber region. The Black Forest held immense strategic value. Occupying these woods meant securing the entire southern French zone. The borders required tight enforcement. German military units had already retreated. The local garrison fled days prior. The town stood defenseless. No resistance. Yet artillery pounded the empty streets for 36 straight hours. Heavy shells shattered abandoned timber-framed houses. The roar of artillery echoed through empty municipal squares. The barrage stopped. The 4th Moroccan Tirailleurs Regiment moved in. The 6th Spahis Regiment followed. Cavalry troops advanced through the rubble. They found nothing, just vacant streets. Hundreds of miles away, the general drafted his assessment. He wrote to the French Committee of National Liberation. The correspondence sits today in the Paris military archives. He had to explain his troops. Reports of mass violence circulated widely. These very units had previously fought at Monte Cassino. They brought that exact operational history into Germany. Commanders required an official justification for these actions. Delattre complied. His April 1945 letter rewrote the occupation mandate. Those who suffered under the Germans now become avengers.